A powerful CEO sits in an upscale restaurant, surrounded by his business partners, feeling untouchable. He's about to close the biggest deal of his career when he spots something that amuses him: a black waitress who dares to correct his pronunciation of a foreign dish. What happens next will leave you speechless. He thinks he's found the perfect target for his cruel joke. After all, who would expect a restaurant server to know multiple languages? But this CEO is about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. Never judge a book by its cover. Because this waitress isn't just serving food, she's about to serve him the most humbling experience he'll never forget. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Because tomorrow at the same time, we'll bring you another story of black people leading the way that you won't want to miss. Marcus Wellington III adjusted his Italian silk tie and surveyed the elegant dining room of Le Bernardin with satisfaction. The mahogany-paneled walls, crystal chandeliers, and hushed conversations of Manhattan's elite created the perfect atmosphere for what would be the most important business lunch of his career. Across from him sat three Japanese investors whose venture capital firm could transform his struggling tech company into a billion-dollar empire. "Gentlemen," Marcus said, raising his wine glass, "today marks the beginning of a beautiful partnership." Tanaka-san, the lead investor, smiled politely but remained reserved. His associates, Suzuki and Yamamoto, exchanged glances that Marcus couldn't quite read. The tension was subtle but palpable. These men weren't impressed by the expensive restaurant or Marcus's designer suit. They wanted substance, not flash. A young black woman approached their table with practiced grace. Her name tag read Amara, and despite the simple black uniform required of all servers, she carried herself with an unmistakable dignity that caught Marcus's attention for all the wrong reasons. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. May I start you with some appetizers? I'd recommend the Toro Tataki. It's exceptional today," Amara said, her voice clear and professional. Marcus's eyebrow arched. "Toro Tataki? You mean Toro Tataki?" He deliberately mispronounced the Japanese words with exaggerated American inflection, then chuckled. "I appreciate the effort, sweetheart, but leave the pronunciation to those of us who actually know what we're talking about." The Japanese investors shifted uncomfortably, but Marcus was too focused on what he perceived as an opportunity to establish dominance to notice their reaction. Amara's expression remained neutral, though something flickered behind her dark eyes. "Actually, sir, it's pronounced Turo Tataki. The O sounds are longer in Japanese." The correction hung in the air like a challenge thrown down at high noon. Marcus felt his face flush red. This waitress, this nobody, had just corrected him in front of the most important clients of his life. The investors were watching now, their expressions unreadable but attentive. He couldn't let this slide. His reputation, his deal, his entire future hung in the balance. "Excuse me?" Marcus's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Did you just correct me? Do you have any idea who I am? I'm the CEO of Wellington Technologies. I've done business in Tokyo more times than you've probably left this city." Amara remained calm, but her grip on the notepad tightened slightly. "I apologize if I overstepped, sir. You were simply forgetting your place." Marcus interrupted, his voice growing louder. Other diners began to glance over, sensing confrontation. "Tell me, Einstein, since you're so worldly and educated, what's your degree in?" "Waitressing one." Suzuki whispered something to Tanaka in rapid Japanese, but Marcus was too focused on his target to pay attention. He was enjoying this now, feeding off the power dynamic. This was exactly the kind of dominance display that would show these investors he was a man who commanded respect. "I have a master's degree, actually," Amara replied quietly, her professionalism never wavering despite the public humiliation. Marcus laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that cut through the restaurant's refined atmosphere. "A master's degree? In what? Food service? Come on, we both know that's not true. If you were really educated, you wouldn't be here taking our order." The entire dining room had fallen silent now. Even the kitchen staff had emerged to watch the spectacle. Marcus felt triumphant, powerful, in control. He was about to deliver his finishing blow, the moment that would put this uppity waitress in her place once and for all. But as he opened his mouth to continue his attack, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Tanaka was staring at him with an expression of pure disgust. "You know what?" Marcus said, his voice dripping with condescension as he reached into his briefcase. "Since you claim to be so educated, let's put that to the test." He pulled out a document written entirely in Japanese, the very contract he'd been planning to discuss with his investors. "If you're really as smart as you pretend to be, translate this." He slammed the paper down on the table with theatrical flair, expecting to see fear or embarrassment cross Amara's face. Instead, she simply glanced down at the document, then back up at him with an expression he couldn't quite identify. "Go ahead," Marcus continued, his voice growing more aggressive. "Show everyone in this restaurant just how educated you really are. Or maybe you'd prefer to apologize for wasting our time with your ridiculous claims?" The Japanese investors were no longer even attempting to hide their discomfort. Tanaka had gone completely still, his hands folded tightly in his lap. Suzuki was shaking his head almost imperceptibly, while Yamamoto looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. Amara picked up the document with steady hands. Marcus crossed his arms, already savoring his victory. There was no way a restaurant server could read complex Japanese business terminology. He'd chosen this particular contract specifically because it contained technical language that even many native speakers would struggle with. "This is a venture capital investment agreement," Amara began, her voice clear and steady, "between Wellington Technologies and Sakura Ventures, detailing the terms for a $40 million Series B funding round." Marcus's smug expression faltered. She was reading the header correctly, but that could be lucky guessing. Anyone could figure that out from context. He said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Keep going. Read the actual terms." Amara's eyes moved methodically across the page. Section 3.2 states that the investors will receive a 25% equity stake in exchange for their investment, with standard liquidation preferences and anti-dilution provisions. The agreement includes performance milestones that must be met within 18 months, specifically relating to user acquisition and revenue targets. The color drained from Marcus's face as she continued, translating complex legal and financial terminology with the precision of a professional interpreter. But what happened next would haunt him for the rest of his career. Section 4.1 discusses the management structure post-investment. Amara continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. It specifically states that if performance targets are not met, the board reserves the right to replace current leadership with more experienced management. Marcus felt like the floor was disappearing beneath him. She wasn't just reading the contract, she was translating nuances that required deep understanding of both languages and business terminology. But how was this possible? Tanaka finally spoke, his English careful but clear. "Miss, may I ask where you learned Japanese?" Amara's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something deeper underneath. "I lived in Kyoto for 3 years while completing my research." "Research?" Suzuki interjected, leaning forward with sudden interest. "My master's thesis was on cross-cultural business communication between American and Japanese corporations. I studied at Doshisha University under Professor Nakamura's guidance." The name hit the investors like lightning. They exchanged rapid words in Japanese, their entire demeanor shifting from polite discomfort to shocked recognition. Marcus tried to regain control of the situation. "This is ridiculous. You expect us to believe that someone with your qualifications is working as a waitress? Sometimes life doesn't go according to plan." "Mr. Wellington," Amara replied, but there was steel in her voice now. "Sometimes the job market is difficult for people who don't fit certain expectations. Sometimes you take whatever work you can find while you figure out your next move." She set the contract down gently on the table. "But just because someone is serving your food doesn't mean they're beneath you. It doesn't mean they're stupid. And it certainly doesn't mean they deserve to be humiliated in public for sport." The restaurant remained dead silent, every eye fixed on their table. Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead as he realized that this situation had spiraled completely out of his control. Then Tanaka stood up, his face a mask of cold professionalism, and Marcus knew his nightmare was just beginning. "Mr. Wellington," Tanaka said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "This meeting is over." Marcus shot to his feet, panic rising in his throat. "Wait, please, let me explain." "There is nothing to explain." Suzuki interrupted, also standing. We have seen enough. Yamamoto was already gathering his materials, his movements sharp and decisive. The three investors had transformed from potential partners into judges delivering a verdict, and Marcus could see his $40 million future crumbling before his eyes. Gentlemen, please, Marcus pleaded, his earlier arrogance replaced by desperate fear. You can't judge my entire company based on one misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Tanaka's voice was ice cold. You publicly humiliated a woman who speaks our language better than you speak your own. You mocked her education while displaying your own ignorance. This is not a misunderstanding, Mr. Wellington. This is who you are. The other diners watched in fascination as the most powerful person at the table became the most powerless. Marcus's designer suit and expensive watch meant nothing now. His title, his company, his carefully constructed image, all of it was worthless in the face of his own cruelty. Amara remained perfectly still, neither gloating nor retreating. She had become the eye of the storm, calm and dignified while chaos swirled around her. Miss, Tanaka addressed her directly. I must apologize for witnessing such treatment. Your Japanese is excellent, better than many business professionals I work with in Tokyo. Thank you, Amara replied simply. Professor Nakamura is a respected colleague of mine. Your research supervisor chose his students very carefully. Tanaka reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Perhaps you would be interested in discussing opportunities with our firm. We are always seeking talented individuals who understand both cultures. Marcus watched in horror as his former investors, offered his victim the very opportunities he had just lost through his own stupidity and prejudice. But the evening's revelations weren't over yet. As Tanaka handed Amara his business card, she looked at it carefully, and something shifted in her expression. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Not cruel like Marcus's had been, but knowing. Sakura Ventures, she read aloud. You're the firm that's been looking for a cultural liaison for your American expansion, aren't you? The three investors exchanged surprised glances. You know of our company? Yamamoto asked. I should, Amara said, her voice carrying a new confidence. I've been consulting for your competitors for the past 6 months, helping American companies understand Japanese business culture, and vice versa. I've been waiting for the right opportunity to approach Sakura directly. Marcus felt like he was watching a movie where the plot had spun completely out of his control. Wait, you're a consultant? But you're working here as a waitress? Yes, Amara confirmed. I pick up shifts here when I'm between consulting contracts. The owner is a family friend, and it keeps me grounded. Reminds me that honest work has dignity, no matter what form it takes. She looked directly at Marcus, and he saw something in her eyes that made him shrink back. Not anger, but pity. You see, Mr. Wellington, you made the same mistake that many people make. You looked at my uniform instead of listening to my words. You saw my skin color and made assumptions about my intelligence and worth. But the most successful business leaders I work with know that wisdom and talent can come from anywhere, and they're smart enough to recognize it when they see it. Tanaka nodded approvingly. This is exactly the kind of insight we need for our American operations. Miss Dr. Amara Okafor, she said, and Marcus nearly choked on his water. I finished my PhD in international business relations last month. Dr. Okafor, not Miss, not sweetheart. The investors were now completely focused on her, their earlier interest in Marcus's company forgotten. They began discussing potential collaboration, speaking in a mixture of English and Japanese that flowed effortlessly between them. Marcus stood frozen, watching his career implode in real time. But that wasn't even the worst part. As the conversation between Dr. Okafor and the Sakura Ventures team grew more animated, Marcus realized that other diners were recording the interaction on their phones. In the age of social media, his public meltdown wouldn't stay confined to this restaurant. By tomorrow, the story of the CEO who mocked a waitress only to discover she was more qualified than him would be viral. Mr. Wellington, Tanaka said, finally acknowledging him again. Let me be clear about something. We came here today prepared to invest in your company. Your financials were promising. Your technology innovative. But business is built on relationships, and character matters more than profit margins. He paused, letting the words sink in. A man who treats service workers with contempt will eventually treat his employees, his partners, and his customers the same way. We cannot invest in that kind of leadership. Marcus wanted to argue, to defend himself, to somehow salvage this disaster. But what could he say? That he was only cruel to people he thought were beneath him. That he was usually more careful about hiding his prejudices. There was no explanation that wouldn't make things worse. Dr. Okafor finished exchanging contact information with the investors and turned to face Marcus one final time. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm, the tone of a teacher delivering a lesson that needed to be learned. Mr. Wellington, I hope you understand something important today. The woman serving your coffee might be a scientist. The man cleaning your office might be a poet. The teenager bagging your groceries might be the next great innovator. We all have stories, dreams, and capabilities that extend far beyond what you can see on the surface. She paused, and Marcus found himself unable to look away from her eyes. The sad thing is, you probably could have learned something valuable from me if you'd approached our interaction with curiosity instead of cruelty. Instead, you chose to diminish me to make yourself feel bigger. And in doing so, you made yourself smaller than you ever imagined possible. As Dr. Okafor walked away to attend to her other tables, because despite everything, she still had a job to finish, Marcus remained standing in the empty space where his future used to be. The investors had left, the other diners had returned to their meals, and the restaurant gradually returned to normal. But Marcus Wellington III would never be the same. Because sometimes, the most powerful lesson comes not from success, but from the moment when your assumptions crash headfirst into reality, and reality wins. The next morning, his phone would be buzzing with calls from reporters, his company's stock would be plummeting, and his own board would be demanding his resignation. But right now, in this moment, he was just a man learning the hardest truth of all, that true power lies not in putting others down, but in lifting them up. And he had just witnessed a masterclass in dignity from someone he'd tried to destroy. The waitress had indeed served him something unforgettable that day. Not food, but humility. And unlike his expensive meal, this lesson would last a lifetime.